Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through the noise and deliver the core knowledge you need to stay well-informed, fast.
Today, we're undertaking a really interesting mission, extracting the key strategic insights from a TikTok performance analysis and growth plan.
Yeah?
This deep dive focuses on the account at NoGood.io, based on work Ekelens did, covering, August 2024 through May 2025.
And this isn't just, a quick look. We're diving into the real engine room here. Actual TikTok analytics data, the content itself that NoGood put out.
And the specific strategic recommendations from Ekelens. So the full picture.
Right.
And for anyone who doesn't know, NoGood is a growth marketing agency. They really practice what they preach on TikTok.
How so?
Well, they use the platform itself to dissect marketing trends, brand strategies, all in a way that clicks with both marketing pros and that trend-savvy Gen Z audience.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. What you're about to get, our listener, is a really clear view of the mechanics behind a successful TikTok strategy.
Yeah, we'll be looking at real examples, uncovering some surprising engagement trends.
And pulling out actionable insights, things that can really sharpen your understanding of what works on social media.
So let's start with NoGood's content strategy. What exactly were they posting consistently?
Well, their main thing is analyzing marketing campaigns, brand collabs, cultural moments, the big stuff.
Okay.
But they do it with this really sharp, often witty, critical eye. They've kind of positioned themselves as the marketing experts who aren't afraid to say what works and what really doesn't.
And they use specific examples, right? Not just general statements. That's key for showing expertise.
Exactly. Remember the HBO Max rebrand to just Max?
Vaguely, yeah.
NoGood pointed out how smart it was that they engaged directly with people in the comments. They quoted them saying, HBO Max chose to meet their audience right where they are in the comment sections.
Ah, interesting. So the insight is about meeting the audience on their turf.
Precisely. It's not just what happened, but the why behind the strategy. And they don't pull punches with criticism either. Panera Bread's croissant clutch.
Oh yeah, that bag thing.
NoGood's take was, quote, when brands try to recycle what worked without tapping into what people are talking about, it feels more lazy than bold. Ouch.
Huh. So the takeaway there is authenticity, staying plugged into the current vibe.
Totally. You can't just repeat old tricks.
And this mix, the deep analysis, but with that conversational, almost edgy style. That seems core to their appeal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it lets them talk to seasoned marketers and Gen Z who, value that directness.
Right. Okay, so how are people finding this content? Let's talk hashtags and keywords.
What did the analysis show there?
Well, their hashtags lined up directly with their content. Things like hashtag marketing, hashtag rebrand, hashtag design, hashtag gents. Pretty standard for their niche.
Makes sense. Helps TikTok sort the content.
Exactly. Connects them with the right communities.
And keywords in the actual posts, in the captions and stuff.
Yeah, the analysis found they often use words like rebrand, campaign, and viral.
Which reinforces their focus.
Right, and probably boosts them in TikTok search too.
Can you give an example? How did a hashtag link to a specific video?
Sure. For the HBO Max post, they used hashtag HBO Max. Makes sense.
And the Google logo critique?
That one used hashtag design talk. So reaching out directly to that design community.
Okay, so a solid base for reach, but Ekelens saw room for more, right? Different hashtags.
Yeah, the analysis suggested they could maybe experiment a bit. Try some broader trending tags or even more niche ones to see if they could pull in new audiences.
Gotcha. Now, posting frequency. Consistency is huge on these platforms, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And NoGood seemed pretty disciplined here. Between August 24 and May 25, they averaged about 5 to 6 posts per month.
Okay.
But what's key is the rhythm. They posted roughly every 3 to 5 days. And apparently that lines up really well with their own optimal posting frequency target of every 3 days.
So they're following their own advice. Good sign.
It is. The analysis even caught a burst of activity, like 5 posts in just 2 days back in May 2025.
Wonder what that was about. A specific event, maybe?
Could be. A strategic push around something timely.
And the steady posting. That's good for the algorithm, I assume.
Definitely. TikTok tends to favor accounts that are consistently active. It signals you're providing regular content, which likely helps with visibility.
Okay, let's get to the juicy stuff. Engagement. What content really popped and what kind of fell flat?
Right, the data here is really telling. They had a couple of massive hits. One was about SEA's beauty brand launch.
Oh yeah, how big?
1.1 million views. And a really strong rate, 8.39%. That's the percentage of viewers who liked it, so it shows it really resonated.
Wow. What was the angle?
NoGood highlighted the strategy. SEA is only selling her products on tour at pop-up shops. Celebrity appeal plus exclusivity.
Potent mix.
Yeah, that scarcity factor definitely drives buzz.
Yeah.
What else did really well?
Another viral one was about the Vegas Sphere's financial troubles. That hit 2.1 million views.
Whoa, why so high?
The quote they used was simple but shocking. It lost almost $1 billion in just 1 year.
Oof. That's a scroll stopper. Exactly. Stark data presented clearly can be incredibly powerful.
Makes sense. So those were the highs. What about the content that didn't quite land?
Well, for instance, they did a parody video about Blue Origin. It only got about 1,700 views. It suggests maybe their audience isn't as into the straight-up comedy skits. They seem to prefer the analysis.
Interesting. So the type of content really mattered for engagement levels.
Very much so. The analysis showed spikes when they covered trending topics like the Met Gala or Coachella, or when they offered a really bold critique.
And the dips.
Dips tended to happen with posts that felt less timely or maybe leaned too far into humor without that analytical edge.
Okay, so summing up this section, what were NoGood's core strengths and where were the opportunities?
Well, a huge strength is delivering those sharp, timely marketing insights that connect with their niche, like their Figma analysis.
Right, the design tool that became a movement line.
Exactly. Super insightful, spot on for their audience. That shows they really get it.
So they know their core audience well, but opportunities to grow beyond that.
The analysis pointed towards maybe experimenting with broader cultural topics or trying more interactive stuff like Q&As, things that might pull in new viewers.
What about that consistent posting schedule? Good, but could it be better?
Consistency is definitely a strength, like we said. But Ekelens suggested they could potentially get even more visibility by timing posts better, specifically aligning with peak audience times, like Tuesday at 11:00 p.m. was mentioned.
Okay, so fine-tuning the timing.
Yeah.
So overall assessment of the content strategy.
Overall, they really nailed that sweet spot between marketing expertise and cultural relevance. They've carved out a great niche, but there's definitely room to grow by playing with different formats and maybe broadening their hashtag game.
Makes sense. Okay, let's switch gears to the business side. NoGood is an agency, right? How do they actually use TikTok to promote their services?
Right, first let's be clear on what they do. They're a growth marketing agency. NoGood.io is their site. They offer things like data-driven growth strategies, viral social media campaigns.
Like the HBO Max analysis showed they understand.
Exactly. Plus brand positioning, rebranding support like their Boy Smells critique, touched on content creation, campaign analysis, influencer marketing, community engagement, the whole suite.
Okay, a full service agency. But how do they weave that into TikTok without sounding, salesy all the time?
And that's where they're quite smart, I think. They don't really do hard sells or constant calls to action.
No,
instead, they showcase their expertise through the analysis, those sharp breakdowns of real campaigns. They position NoGood as the experts you'd want to hire.
So the content is the advertisement, in a way. Show, don't tell.
Pretty much. Can I give a couple more examples?
Please do.
Okay, so when they talked about Figma's growth, they mentioned how Figma used designed Twitter and Slack groups early on for feedback. That's valuable info about Figma, sure. But it also subtly shows NoGood understands community-led growth. Or the HBO Max analysis again.
Yeah.
When they said, brands that are self-aware and active listeners can turn anything negative into a positive content strategy. Well, that implies NoGood knows how to create those kinds of strategies for clients.
Got it. So the analysis itself works like a portfolio piece, demonstrating their thinking.
Exactly. Their insights act as implicit testimonials. It shows their capabilities without having to spell it out.
And this wasn't just something they started doing recently. This was consistent.
Yeah, the Ekelens report confirmed this was a steady approach across all the posts they looked at, from August 24 right through to May 25. It's a core part of their TikTok DNA.
Okay, so wrapping up this part. How well does this strategy work? Blending service promotion with content.
I'd say they've mastered it. They align their services perfectly with that witty, trend-focused marketing authority persona they've built. By dissecting campaigns, offering smart critiques, highlighting wins, they really connect with marketers, brand managers, and that savvy Gen Z crowd.
So they become a go-to resource.
Precisely. For any brand trying to figure out the digital landscape.
Now, a big part of their analysis involves talking about other brands, right? Let's dig into those mentions.
Absolutely. Across those 53 posts, they referenced a whole bunch of brands and services. It's what makes their points concrete and relatable.
So let's run through some key ones. Which brands came up often?
Okay, well, HBO Max was frequent, often praised for the self-aware rebranding campaign stuff. Google came up too, but usually more critically, especially about that logo rebrand.
I can remember that critique. Old logo if it had astigmatism.
Yeah, that one. Supercoop and American Eagle popped up in a social media trends roundup.
And the sentiment, mostly positive, negative, neutral.
A real mix. HBO Max was pretty neutral. Google was definitely mixed, leaning negative on the logo. Supergoop and American Eagle were just mentioned neutrally as examples in that roundup.
Interesting. How did these mentions affect engagement? Did talking about big brands automatically get more likes or comments?
Not necessarily. It's interesting, the neutral HBO Max mention actually had pretty low engagement. But the critical Google logo posts, especially the really sharp one, that tended to get more interaction.
So controversy drives clicks, maybe. Or at least comments.
We often does, yeah. People have opinions. Other notable mentions,
Yeah.
they rated a bunch of Mother's Day campaigns.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Calm got a 10/10 for their free Rage Room idea, which is pretty great. Kraft Mac and Cheese necklace got a 6/10. Poise got a 5/10 for their bladder issue cards. Maybe due direct. KFC and DoorDash got decent ratings for their campaigns.
So they weren't afraid to assign scores.
Not at all. Figma got praise for community growth. Panera's croissant clutch was called a failure. Lazy than bold, remember.
Right.
Chipotle got positive nods for fan-driven stuff like their Black Fork collection. Netflix's You pop-up was praised as immersive.
Okay. Any really negative ones that stood out?
Well, Reformation got called out for cultural appropriation. Looks an awful lot like a lehenga. That post got high engagement, likely due to the controversy. And Boy Smells rebrand got absolutely slammed as the potential worst rebrand of 2025. Pretty harsh.
Wow, they really don't hold back.
Nope. They covered Coachella activations too. 818, Tequila, Road, Cosas, Right Place, Right Time with a sunscreen car,
Oh.
Poppy, One Size, Pinterest, Most Interactive, Sol de Janeiro. Mostly positive mentions there.
Lots of examples.
Then there was POTA's controversial launch, insensitive and disrespectful to Japanese culture. Progressive's quirky thirst trap billboards, Black Mirror's timely promo, mirror to where tech is headed, even mentions linked to the White Lotus involving Vitamix's clapback.
Okay, a huge range. Crumble's Kardashian collab was deemed bad timing. Starface got praised for Gen Z branding, remove the stigma. Partiful got a speculative mention about a Timothy Chalamet stunt. New Yorkers would show up for almost anything.
Shein got critiqued on fast fashion ethics. Barrow Tom Holland's brand got high praise for authenticity, heartfelt reason. Apple's Vision Pro marketing, isolating, and iPhone AI delay got critiqued. Meta's glasses were seen as a worthwhile risk. Replace your smartphone.
They even did playful brand voice examples with a ton of brands like Milk Makeup, Stanley, Crocs, Skims.
Right, and Nutter Butter's new bold voice got praised, catching people off guard, while Lunchly got torn apart for health concerns, a grift. JanSport's collab with Yan got high praise, accomplished what Michael Cera and Saraive wished they could. Even Philadelphia cream cheese got critiqued for pumpkin spice.
Okay, so what's the overall impact of using all these brand mentions?
It massively strengthens their authority. Using real, current examples proves they know what's happening right now. And it drives engagement because, well, their audience cares about these brands and the discussions around them.
And it seems like how they mention them matters, right?
Absolutely. Controversial takes, culturally relevant topics, positive mentions of brands seen as authentic. Those tended to spike engagement much more than just listing brands in a roundup. Targeted, story-driven mentions are definitely more powerful.
Makes sense. Okay, what about working with influencers? That's another common TikTok strategy. Did NoGood do much of that?
You know, based on the Ekelund's analysis, their direct influencer collaborations seemed pretty limited during this period. Only 2 specific instances were highlighted.
Really? Only 2? Tell me about them.
Okay, so one was basically a shout out to Elisa Karshi. She did a comedic campaign for Supergoop, and NoGood mentioned it, saying she was promoting Supergoop left and right through a comedy series.
And the point was?
To show how influencer comedy can work for brands, it seems.
Okay. How did that specific post do for NoGood, engagement-wise?
Actually, pretty low engagement. Only around 677 views, 21 likes.
So just mentioning it didn't move the needle much?
Apparently not in that context, no. Might have gotten lost in the broader post.
What was the other collaboration mentioned?
That was a shout out to @JohnBaby for their collaboration with JanSport. NoGood really praised the authenticity there, saying, Jan and Jansport accomplished what Michael, Sarah, and Sareve wish they could. It just reads a lot better.
Highlighting genuine connection.
Exactly.
And the engagement on that one.
Way, way better. 65,100 views and about 10,000 likes. A huge difference.
Wow. Okay, so that suggests authenticity and collabs really resonate.
Definitely. The contrast is stark.
So even though they didn't do many collaborations, the ones focused on authenticity performed really well. What's the overall takeaway on their influencer strategy?
Well, it seems like while it wasn't a major focus, when they did highlight genuine, well-matched partnerships, like the Jansport one, it paid off significantly in engagement. The Atlas Akashi mention getting lost suggests maybe quick shoutouts and roundups aren't as effective. It kind of mirrors the findings about brand mentions, actually.
Interesting connection. Did the report suggest they should do more influencer stuff?
Yeah, the fact that they did so few suggests there's an opportunity there. Maybe try more direct collabs, like joint videos or duets. It could boost credibility and definitely expand their reach to new audiences.
Okay. Now, given NoGood's critical style, we have to talk risk. Did Ekelens look into potential downsides or risks in their content?
They did. Ekelens ran a risk assessment across those 53 posts, looking at things like profanity, controversial topics, drug alcohol mentions, hate speech, negative brand mentions, and any adult or suggestive content.
Right. What did they find? Any red flags?
Overall, not really major ones. Profanity was minimal, maybe some mild slang like grift. We're talking about lunchly, but that's generally low risk for their Gen Z audience.
Okay, what about controversial stuff?
They did touch on things like cultural appropriation sometimes, with POTA or Reformation and ethical marketing. That carries a moderate risk just because those topics can be polarizing,
Sure. What about sensitive areas like drugs or violence?
Drug and alcohol reps were super minimal, mostly just mentioning things like 18 tequila in the Coachella context, low risk, but noted. And importantly, 0 instances of violence or hate speech were found, so no risk there.
Good. But what about all the negative brand mentions? They criticize brands a lot. Is that a risk?
That was flagged as a moderate risk.
Yeah.
Because while their audience might appreciate the honesty, constantly dunking on brands could make those brands, or similar ones, hesitant to partner with NoGood down the line.
Right. Could close some doors. And adult content.
Almost none.
Yeah.
Just that one funny mention of thirst trap billboards for progressive. Very low risk. Fit their tone.
So what was the final score? The overall risk level?
Ekelens gave them a low to moderate score, 12 out of 60. The main things bumping it up slightly were those negative brand mentions and the occasional controversial topic.
How does that risk level affect their potential for brand partnerships?
Well, their core audience, Gen Z, marketers, probably values that authenticity and can handle a bit of edge. But more conservative brands might shy away. That critical tone is part of their brand, but it's definitely a double-edged sword for partnerships. Constantly being negative about brands could alienate some potential collaborators.
Right. So final thoughts from the risk assessment.
Basically, their risk profile is low to moderate, fits their niche, but requires some awareness regarding partnerships. They need to maintain authenticity, but maybe balancing the critiques with positive examples or exploring slightly less edgy content occasionally could broaden their appeal without losing their core identity.
Okay, let's dive into the hard numbers. Engagement metrics. What did the analysis show about things like likes per view?
Right. Across the 53 posts, Ekelens calculated the averages. The average like-to-view rate was 5.75%, share-to-view was lower, 0.19%, and comment-to-view was 0.11%.
And those averages suggest.
They pretty much confirm what we've been saying.
Yeah.
Authentic, story-driven content tends to get the best engagement overall.
Were there specific posts that blew these averages away, real standouts?
Oh, definitely. That barrel launch post, really high like rate, 11.83%, likely due to the emotional story and Tom Holland's appeal.
Makes sense.
And the Jansport collaboration post we talked about, even higher like rate, 15.36%, plus a strong share rate of 0.56%, really shows the power of authentic influencer content.
Wow, huge numbers.
And interestingly, the Lunchley critique, while negative, had a high comment rate relative to others. It clearly got people talking.
So controversy sparked discussion there. What about the posts that didn't do so well by these metrics, the underperformers?
Yeah, some posts lagged behind. That social media trends roundup, the Google logo critique, the HBO Max rebrand analysis. Those generally had lower like, share, and comment rates compared to their average.
Any common themes among those less engaging posts?
The analysis suggested a few things. The roundup might have just been too broad, no single focus. The Google humor maybe didn't land universally, felt a bit niche or technical, and the HBO Max post, while analytical, might have been too niche for the wider audience.
Okay. Did the report find any other correlations? Like, did video length matter or posting time?
Yes, a few interesting points. Emotional or controversial themes generally outperformed purely analytical stuff. Shorter videos, under 30 seconds, tended to get higher like rates. And there was a hint that posts from Subtektok 2024 and weekend posts might have seen slightly higher engagement overall, though timing needs more specific analysis later.
So, based on all that engagement data, what were the main recommendations from Ekelens? How could NoGood boost interaction?
The advice centered on leaning into emotional or controversial content more often, keeping videos short and punchy, maybe experimenting more with weekend posting, and making sure to balance the critical takes with positive stories to keep the appeal broad.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about something harder to quantify. Emotional connection, storytelling. How well did NoGood connect on that level?
Ekelens actually analyzed the emotional tones across the posts. They identified 5 main ones: humor, critique, inspiration, education, and urgency.
And which was most common?
Humor led the way, found in about 34% of posts. Critique was close behind at 30%, then inspiration at 19%, education 13%, and urgency only about 4%.
Interesting breakdown. How did those different tones affect engagement?
This is really key. Inspiration actually had the highest average like rate, around 8.5%. That barrel launch post is a perfect example.
Wow, so positive vibes work best for likes.
Seems so. Humor also did well, 7.2% like rate. Critique had a moderate like rate, but the highest comment rate, maybe because it provoked debate, like the Lunchley post.
And education.
That had the lowest engagement overall, around 4.8%. Urgency was moderate.
So it seems leaning into inspiration and humor might be a smart move for boosting those numbers.
Definitely looks that way. The posts that really resonated emotionally, like Barrow's inspirational story or the Jan Sport collab that mixed humor and inspiration, they clearly hit differently. Even the Lunchley critique used urgency and a clear narrative structure effectively.
So what were the recommendations for NoGood based on this emotional analysis? How could they strengthen that connection?
Ekelens suggested trying to blend inspiration and humor more deliberately, using clear story arcs beginning, middle, and even in short videos, keeping things concise, under 30 seconds, using trending audio to boost the mood, and again, balancing the critiques with more inspirational content to broaden appeal. Dynamic visuals help too, of course.
Great insights, but realistically, not every post is a winner. Let's talk about the underperformers. How did Ekelens diagnose why certain posts didn't connect?
Right, they picked out 3 specific posts with low engagement. That social media trends roundup, the Google logo critique, and the HBO Max rebrand analysis. Then they dug into why.
What did they find? Any common reasons for the low numbers?
Yes, some patterns emerged. For the trends roundup, we cook at the start. Focus was too diluted across many brands, video was a bit long, and it was posted midweek.
Okay, the Google critique.
That seemed to lack an emotional hook. The humor was maybe too niche, too design-focused, and it felt more educational, which we know tends to get lower engagement for them. Also posted midweek.
In the HBO Max one?
Similar issues, maybe?
Yeah.
Niche topic, very analytical tone, and potentially just suboptimal timing for that specific content.
So it often wasn't the information itself, but the packaging and timing.
Exactly. So the solutions focus on that. For roundups, make the hook stronger. Maybe focus on just one brand story within the roundup. Use conversational prompts, keep it shorter, use trending tags.
And for the more analytical stuff?
Inject more emotion, use relatable stories, maybe more humor or inspiration, ask questions. And definitely experiment with posting times. Maybe weekends could work better for those deeper dives.
Did they spot any completely untapped opportunities for NoGood based on these weaker posts?
Yeah, a couple of ideas. Exploring more niche hashtags to target specific marketing segments, jumping on emerging cultural trends faster, and maybe even creating content specifically for slightly older marketers, addressing their unique challenges, perhaps.
Sounds like a solid plan to turn those misses into hits, or at least learning opportunities.
Totally. They even laid out a phased approach. First, fix the hooks and length, then play with tone and timing, then target new trends and audiences. The goal is really to make every post contribute to growth.
Smart. Okay, let's zoom out again. Monthly performance. How did NoGood fare overall from January to May 2025? What was the big picture trend?
The big picture was generally positive. Looking at views, likes, comments, shares, favorites month by month, there was a clear upward trend overall. consistent growth across that period.
Nice. Were there any standout months, big jumps, or maybe slowdowns?
March 2025 really stood out. It had the highest growth rates across the board. That seemed linked to some successful humorous posts and tapping into trends effectively.
Okay, so March was a peak. Any dips?
May 2025 showed a noticeable slowdown in the growth rate compared to previous months. And that seemed connected to some of those underperforming roundup posts we just talked about.
Ah, so the content mix in a given month really impacted the overall growth trajectory.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a smooth, steady climb. March's peak showed the power of humor and trends for them. May's slowdown showed how less engaging content can drag down the overall numbers.
Did the monthly view reveal any persistent weaknesses across the whole period?
Yes, one thing that stood out was consistently low comment rates month after month. The report suggested they could really benefit from actively encouraging more interaction, asking direct questions, using prompts in the videos.
So even with overall positive growth, there's always room to optimize, especially that interaction piece.
Precisely. The upward trend shows the core strategy works. But addressing those monthly variations by focusing on high engagement content types and actively soliciting comments could make their growth even stronger and more consistent.
Makes total sense. Finally, let's nail down the timing aspect. When should NoGood be posting for maximum impact? What did the detailed timing analysis show?
This is super important for visibility. Ekelens broke down engagement rates, likes, comments, shares per view by day of the week and time of day, and some clear peak times emerged.
Okay, lay it on us. When's the golden hour? Or hours?
The highest engagement consistently happened midweek evenings, specifically Wednesdays and Tuesdays between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Thursdays in that same evening window were also very strong.
Right, that after work, settling down time for many people.
Exactly. That seems to be prime time for their audience.
Were there other decent times, secondary peaks?
Yeah, Mondays and Fridays, also 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., showed good engagement, just slightly lower than midweek. And there was some potential during weekday lunchtime hours, too, roughly 12 p.m. to 3 p.m.
What about the dead zones, or times they weren't really utilizing?
Engagement dropped off significantly in the early mornings and late at night. Weekends were generally lower, too, especially Sundays, although Saturday evenings showed some promise. The analysis also noted they weren't posting much during midweek mornings, maybe a missed opportunity there, and they rarely posted more than once a day, which might limit reach potential according to general TikTok advice.
Okay, so based on all that data, what were the concrete recommendations for optimizing their posting schedule?
Number 1, prioritize those peak midweek evening slots. 2 Zwethers, 6-9 p.m. 2, experiment more with Saturday evenings. 3, maybe add some posts during that lunchtime window. 4, perhaps test early mornings on Tuesdays or Wednesdays just to see.
And tracking this.
Crucially, use TikTok's own business analytics. Keep monitoring audience activity patterns, because they can change, and use scheduling tools to ensure consistency during those optimal times. They even suggested a simple starting test. Shift one post a week to Wednesday evening, another to Saturday evening, and just track the results.
A very practical, data-driven approach to timing.
Absolutely. Getting the timing right, aligning with when your audience is actually there and ready to engage, can make a huge difference to a post performance.
Wow, well, this has been a seriously deep dive into NoGood's TikTok world. Let's just quickly recap the absolute key takeaways.
Okay, so NoGood has a strong content strategy, witty, critical analysis, blending expertise with culture. Room to optimize formats and hashtags. Influencer collabs work best when authentic. Risk profile is low to moderate. Emotional, authentic content wins engagement. Video length and posting time are key optimization levers.
Especially those Wednesday and Tuesday evenings.
Exactly. Peak times matter.
And for you listening, this whole breakdown is a real-world case study. It gives you concrete examples of what drives TikTok success and actionable ideas, whether for your own content or just understanding the social media game better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thinking about NoGood's success with those sharp critiques, here's something for you to chew on. What do you think is the single biggest marketing trend right now that brands are just fundamentally getting wrong?
Good question. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.